one of the questions is, given your presentation, how do you expect agriculture carbon markets to be at all successful?
Oh, I think the carbon markets are really early in their development. There are lots of questions that still need to be answered, and I don't think I have the answers for those right now. I think this type of system where you can grow a lot more cover crop biomass during the best time of the year to grow anything is going to be a system that will build carbon. But how we can document that and how the actual accountability works with those systems, that will have to play out over time.
Well, I mean, we know economics drives a lot of the systems, and a lot of the questions. Has there been economics, done on any of these as far as the cost and the benefits? And we don't know a lot of the other projects, but when we include grazing or using a forage, we see a lot of benefits there compared to just looking at soil health or use of chemicals and this type of thing. And is it different between organic and conventional and no-till?
Yeah, great question. We are trying to crunch the numbers on our production systems, so I could share some of those. If you have a yield hit of 10, 15, 20%, it's going to be pretty hard, particularly in an organic production system where you might be getting paid $9 a bushel for that corn. That's a lot of lost revenue. But I guess what I would suggest is we need to make sure that we are comparing the right things. If we're just comparing it with 30-inch corn, that's going to be it will be hard to match that revenue with good corn prices. But what if we are comparing the solar corridor corn system to a soil building fallow unit? There are many organic farmers that are looking at regenerative systems where they actually include a year of just soil building. What if we can achieve nearly full soil building effects while also growing a nearly full corn crop? I think the economics there certainly would be better for the solar corridor system than a full year of just regeneration. If you can get the regenerative effect of the cover crops while also growing corn. And I think we're showing that that's possible. The economics of the forage, it depends on how you are translating that forage into high value animal products, just how valuable that forage is. But it would need, to pay for a yield hit of 20% at $9 a bushel, that forage would need to be really valuable. So I think we need to really, work on fine-tuning the management so we can keep that yield hit really low, and also work on capturing as much value from whatever we're doing in the solar corridor. So if we can capture the value in terms of forage, that's what would be probably the most problem.
Well, another question is, question relates, what about greater crop diversity, using more complex rotations under the 60-inch system? Has that been thought of?
Yeah, so I mean, there are other crops that can be grown with solar corridors. It doesn't have to be corn. We know that corn responds to having a lot more light, but other species respond as well. Sunflower might be one that would work well with solar corridors. Then, of course, the corridor doesn't need to be planted to a cover crop. It could be planted to a grain crop that would be harvested. I was looking at online forum this morning, and a farmer was posting about how he is planting corn and soybeans together. And in a nutshell, he's doing solar corridor type cropping where he is planning to harvest both the corn and the soybeans. And he'll come across and harvest the corn first, and then come back with the soybean platform and harvest the beans. And this is evolution where he first was doing wider strips. He was doing strip intercropping, but wider strips, separate strips of corn and beans. Now he has mixed them together, so the strips are much narrower, and so basically he'll have more edge effect, really have the potential for more yield benefit for his corn. And yeah, there are all sorts of possibilities. I think what you do in the solar corridor, that just depends on your creativity, your marketing, your mechanical innovation. And our experience is the simplest approach is to do the planting at the same time, plant the corridor and the cash crop at the same time. And it requires more innovation to do anything other than that.
So has anybody ever looked at cutting seeding rate and see how that have impacted on yields?
People have looked at different populations of corn, and the consensus seems to be that planting nearly the full population that you use for 30-inch corn, or whatever your standard row spacing is probably the best way to go. But that's going to depend on the corn hybrid. There are corn hybrids that have been really amazingly responsive to having very close in-row spacing, but very wide between row spacing. And actually, some hybrids have yielded better on for example, one trial was done last year with 38-inch rows. So the skip row system was 76-inch rows, and there was a hybrid that performed better on the 76s than on the 38s. And we have that hybrid in our trial this year, so we're hoping to see a really good response on 16-inch rows.
One question is, how do organic systems deal with early weeds between the wider rows planted to cover crops?
Well, so the approach that we have arrived at is just doing, planting all of your 30-inch rows, but not planting them all of them to corn. And so, for example, our system where we're just moving back and forth 30 inches, the bean discs dropped a population of cover crops that was a little over 250,000. If all the seed had been singulated, it would have dropped about 180,000. But the fact is that all those smaller irregular seed sizes, resulted in lots of multiple seeds. So we dropped a population that was, I think, about 14 seeds per row foot, and so that developed an in-row canopy very quickly, and quickly prevented weeds from coming into the row. And we set the corn planter for 62,000, so that's 3-inch spacing between the corn plants, and that also developed an in-row canopy very quickly. And with our we did a single rotary hoeing and a single row cultivation, and we have nearly complete weed control in that field. If we had planted corn and left the 60-inch gap, and then let's say came back when the corn was at B5, obviously we would have lots of weeds growing in that corridor if we didn't have a system of controlling those weeds. But our system that I just described is providing very good weed control in the corridors as well as the corn row.
And there's a question about, did you measure, I'm assuming this is soil, or organic matter or C to N ratio any time during the studies?
We're just starting to do those soil measurements, so I can't really share numbers right now, but that's coming. I would say the University of Missouri, Bob Kramer and others have done some pioneering work in that regard and shown specific soil health benefits. When you have more light getting on the lower leaves of the corn, it showed that there were more root exudates being released impacts, that enhances microbial activity and has other soil health enhancing effects. And when you can grow 1 ton or more of cover crop biomass in addition to your corn crop, the carbon effects are going to be much greater than other cover cropping systems where you have much less cover cropping growth. And we need to continue with our work of documenting those effects, but the basic concept, I think, is pretty straightforward.
So, well, you mentioned the late planting. It seemed to be detrimental if the weather's too wet or whatever. If somebody was going to do this, the question was, would you recommend not doing the 60 rows if go back to the 30-inch rows if you had that option? If we couldn't get it in early.
That's a good question. I think that we are seeing, we're seeing excellent growth of the cover crops in our later planting dates, such that I think the systems are working, but I think it just is harder to achieve yield parity, comparable yields when you are planting late. You just don't get as much of a yield boost from the added sunlight in your solar corridor when you have a later planting. So I don't know whether I don't think I would recommend that if you're let's say later than June 1st that you shouldn't plant solar corridor corn systems. Our experience has been positive so far, but we haven't reached comparable yields yet, and part of that may be simply the lack of light when your corn is still quite small on the shortest day of the year.
So,
Longest day of the year. Let me say that correctly.
Are all your projects, are they on level ground, or you have anything on sloping ground?
Our research farm is flat black. It's it's all probably less than 3 feet of variation across the whole farm. The farmer Eric Miller in northeast Iowa, he's on very steeply rolling ground, and he's actually found that one of the benefits with the 60-inch corn rows, he's doing twin rows, is that it's much easier for him to do the spraying of the corn because it's just so easy to drive across those widely spaced corn rows. And he has to have special equipment because of how steep his land is. He has to have a special guidance system, not just for the tractor, but implement guidance as well. But he's found that just the 60-inch configuration makes it much easier for him to do his post-emergence operations across the field.
Do I have there was a question, one concern about, some of the slides showed there was some open rows, and wondered if there would be any issues with erosion, especially in a conventional tillage system with the runoff on, like it sounds like if Eric's is really steep, there must not be too much, or else he wouldn't be doing it because there'd be a lot of erosion issues.
So particularly in conventional herbicide-based programs, most of these farmers that are trying solar corridor planting systems are also planting no-till into a green cover crop. So they start with a cover crop, they plant their corn and terminate the cover crop, and then they plant another cover crop into that dead cover crop biomass, so that you don't need to have bare soil. In our organic approach to this thus far, we have been starting with a fairly conventional tillage program, but we may move towards a no-till or significantly reduced till type of approach. still just a couple of years into this and kind of proving the fundamentals right now. And then over time, we'll fine tune how we do the, how we do the cover crops prior to the corn crop.
I know that economics is a huge thing, and that's when you look at all the different systems and like you mentioned, the situation with doing no-till and planting kind of continuous cover crops into the growing crop, that's helps address the erosion issue for sure. Very interesting topic, and there's a lot of things we have to move forward on this as well. A lot of information and a lot of research has to be done, but people are making it work, especially a lot of farmers are, and very innovative in what they're doing in regard to that. So thanks everyone for participating today. Thanks, Dr. Gruber, for your presentation and all the good information. And I'll be looking forward to hearing more about this project in coming years. So
thank you. I encourage people to get in touch with me if you want more information about what we're doing. I can provide cover crop seeding mixes, seeding rates, and other details like that if you're interested. So just reach out to me if you want more.